What movies are the definition of this meme where the potential was 10 times better than the actual movie? I don't think it's crazy to say that Thor Love and Thunder is one of the best examples of this. Like, this movie was set up to be an absolute home run for the MCU and the character of Thor, and I fumbled it all. After the first Thor was kind of just a middle of the road movie, and Thor the Dark World was just an absolute terrible film that was super boring. A lot of people were down on this character until Thor Ragnarok came around and really just revived the character and people's love of him. And it reminded everybody how great of a character he can be and how amazing Chris Hemsworth was as him. It seemed like he found the perfect director in Taika Waititi to make an amazing duo going forward. And then we got to the movie that is Thor Love and Thunder, and it completely threw away all the progress they just made with the character in Thor Ragnarok. The pieces were all there for this movie to be amazing. Like, we brought back Natalie Portman, who is an amazing actress, as Jane, and we gave her a ton of things to do compared to the first two movies she was in. And I think everything with her cancer storyline in the movie was actually handled really well. It's just the movie doesn't give that enough time to breathe because it's constantly throwing in super unfunny jokes. It's the same problem with Gore the God Butcher. Like, they got Christian Bale, one of the greatest actors working today, and they bring him into the MCU finally as an amazing villain, and in this movie he is incredible, but he barely has any screen time. And when he is on screen, it's a completely different type of movie because it gets way more dark and serious, and it's actually a better film, but then 5 seconds later you're cut right back to the super silly and goofy rest of the film, and it really just takes you out of it. And yes, I understand that every Marvel movie has a ton of humor in it, but you have to know how to balance it out with the more serious moments and when to completely cut out the humor and get more serious. Really happy there's lots of rumors that we're going to be getting a fifth Thor solo movie, but this time they're going to be bringing in a new director, because while I don't think Taika Waititi is a bad director just because he made one bad film, I do think it's time for another refresh of this character and take him in a slightly more serious direction while still learning the lessons from what made Ragnarok successful. But seriously, getting a more Nordic, serious, almost Logan-esque in its style and tone movie for Thor 5 to send off the character could be absolutely amazing. Hopefully that movie lives up to its potential, unlike Love and Thunder. I'm putting the entire Hobbit trilogy in the wasted potential category here because I absolutely adore the books. It's one of my favorite fantasy stories of all time, and these movies just do not capture that whatsoever. But man, the potential was really crazy because not just were they adapting one of the greatest fantasy stories of all time, they also had Peter Jackson, who just directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy, coming back to do this story. Martin Freeman is genuinely incredible in these movies. He is an amazing Bilbo Baggins. Like, he just captures the character so well, and I feel like the movie just wasted him because the later ones don't even focus on Bilbo Baggins at all. That's where the big mistake with these movies lie. The book is not that long, and they tried to drag it out and make it a new epic Lord of the Rings saga. But that's not what the book was, and that's never what these movies were going to be. They should have just made this one movie that was its own entirely different thing, had a different vibe, be more whimsical than the Lord of the Rings movies. It could have been genuinely incredible. In fact, Guillermo del Toro was actually in talks to make the Hobbit movie at one point, and he was going to make it one film, but the studio wanted to be this bigger, bolder thing like the original Lord of the Rings movies. But I honestly wish he got a chance because as much as I love Peter Jackson, he just did not nail the Hobbit trilogy. Dune Part 2 had so much potential that it absolutely lived up to. I'm just making sure you're still awake. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is another movie that had it all laid out for it, and it just could not stick the landing. Now, I don't think this is a terrible movie by any means, but it just is nowhere near the greatness of those first three Indiana Jones movies. Like, they were bringing Harrison Ford back to the one character he actually truly cares about and doesn't absolutely despise like he does Han Solo. They added Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who I think is an amazing actor, so having her in this movie should have really elevated it. Not even to mention the fact that the main villain of the movie is Mads Mikkelsen. This dude is one of the greatest villain actors of all time. Every time he plays a villain in a movie, he absolutely kills it. This movie is no exception, but the rest of the film is kind of wasted around him because it just does not have the charm of those first indie movies. There was also just some weird choices made in this. Like, I don't think it was a great idea to kill off Indiana Jones' son off screen. Even though I don't think he was the greatest in the last film, it still would have been nice to still have him around, or maybe just say he's off somewhere. I know these movies have always been fantastical, but the whole time travel thing felt like it just took it another level too far that these movies never really got to, and I just was not caring for it at all. I'm very glad that they ended that and had him get back to the current time. So while overall this is still a fine like 6 out of 10 movie, it definitely had potential to be an amazing banger of like a 9 out of 10. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I feel like the Extraction movies had a ton of potential that neither lived up to, because these films have genuinely some of the best action in recent movies in the last couple of years. Like, they are mind-blowingly good with the action. The problem comes with literally every other part of the movie. The stories are the most generic, feel like they're generated by AI things. The characters are all unsufferable or just super dull and lifeless. I know a lot of people out there probably don't care. They just see the cool action and they're like, fine, this is an amazing film. And if you're one of those people, that's fine too, but that's just not me. I just wish they put a little bit more effort into all the surrounding pieces, because if you had an actual genuinely good story with this insane level of action, these could genuinely be masterpieces of movies. I said every character is dull. I do kind of take that back because Chris Hemsworth is very good in these movies, but all the supporting characters I just cannot care for whatsoever. Five Nights at Freddy's has become one of the most iconic video game franchises of all time with some of the craziest lore I've ever seen in my life, and the movie is one of the most dull, lifeless, and boring things I've ever seen in my life. Like, listen, it's a horror movie that's not rated R. Obviously, it was never going to be like gross or gory, which I don't need in a horror movie at all, but this really could have been a fun and unique different take on this story. But I'm sorry, they just forgot to make anything interesting happen in this movie at all, which is just such a shame because like I said, there's just so much interesting stuff around the Five Nights at Freddy's game that I really don't know how they made the movie as boring and lifeless as it is. Like, literally nothing happens for the first hour and 10 minutes of this movie, and the film is only like an hour and 40 minutes. The cast of Amsterdam alone is one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. There's so many different A-listers and upcoming celebrities in this film. And you throw all these people into a movie that's this mystery comedy kind of movie. It's like, oh my god, are we going to get like another Knives Out like movie with an absolute stacked cast and it's just super fun? Sadly, the answer was not even close because this movie is so unbelievably boring and just cringy to get through. Like, this movie is trying so unbelievably hard to be quirky and funny and have its own very unique style, which I really admire them at least trying to do something very different, but I'm sorry, none of it works in this film.